Ongoing talks on the slashing carbon emissions at the 2015 Paris Climate Conference will continue on to Saturday after negotiators failed to reach a deal before the Friday deadline. Now, French Foreign Minister and host of the talks, Laurent Fabius, said he will present a new text of the agreement on a Saturday morning, aiming to seal an accord among 200 nations. Sources close to the matter say disagreements are still between rich and poor countries. Developed nations want large developing countries to start paying poorer nations that have suffered the most because of global warming. But this has run into tough resistance from countries such as India, Brazil and Malaysia that say it amounts to a dilution of wealthy countries' historical responsibility for climate change. Now, Kate Parkinson now joins us from Paris with an update on those talks. Kate, great to have you on the show. Now, efforts to forge a deal today have faltered, forcing the talks to overrun to Saturday. How optimistic are negotiators that we will see a deal by tomorrow?
Well, absolutely. What everybody suspected would happen has now been confirmed. These talks are going into overtime. There will not be another text presented today. The French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius, who is presiding over these climate negotiations here in Paris, said he hopes that he will be in a position to present a text at 8 GMT tomorrow morning, and he said he's hopeful that that text will be adopted by all parties represented here at the climate negotiations. Now, despite this overrun, despite the talks going into extra time, there is still a sense of optimism here. The French Foreign Minister, as I mentioned, sounding optimistic even as he was announcing the delay. A spokesperson for the UN Climate Secretariat saying the atmosphere here among the delegates is not one of nerves, it's not one of worry. It is still a feeling of optimism. He said there is still the political will to find a resolution to the divisive issues that still remain. US Secretary of State John Kerry also saying today that he hopes that a deal will be done and is indeed optimistic that a deal will be done. So we're getting lots of positive comments here, but of course it does sound like we have a very tough night of negotiations ahead again for the negotiating teams. So we'll have to wait till tomorrow to see if they do manage to bridge those gaps to come to agreements on these points that have been causing problems for the past few days.
Now, Kate, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, he described the negotiations as the most complicated and difficult. Do you have any insight into some of these issues that are delaying the final push?
Absolutely. The UN Secretary General himself outlined what the most complex issues are. He spoke about climate financing. Financing has been a potential deal blocker throughout these negotiations, and it does remain one of the key sticking points. Who is going to pay to help poorer nations reduce their emissions, switch to low carbon economies? Who's going to pay for the damage caused by global warming? There's also an ongoing problem about differentiation. This is the differences in the text between so-called rich countries and poorer countries. Certainly the poorer countries want more financial assistance from the rich countries. The rich countries want the richer emerging nations to dip into their pockets and do more. So these are two of the issues. Another issue boils down to ambition, how far the agreement should be trying to reduce global warming. Many countries represented here are pushing for a more ambitious target of the original 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. They're pushing for 1.5 degree target, but there's been strong opposition for that target from Saudi Arabia. Also, some differences of opinion about the reviews. The United States and the European Union are pushing for 5-yearly reviews for countries to update their targets to reduce emissions. China does have an opposition to this. The Chinese President Xi Jinping has outlined very clearly China's ambitions to reduce its emissions and does not want to update that. So these are the big sticking points. These are what negotiators will be talking about throughout the night here in Paris.
Well, we certainly hope they reach a deal. Thanks so much, Kate, for that.